Longer spells of rain across pretty much all areas of the country. A few clearer spells here and there, and where that comes with lighter winds, we could see the odd mist and fog patch forming, perhaps some sea fog forming around some coasts as well. But underneath that cloud, temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius. Just that bit chillier up in the far north, Shetland down to around 3 degrees Celsius. Throughout Saturday, then, a continued risk of showers throughout the day. More persistent, though, across areas of Scotland and Northern Ireland, turning quite damp for here at a time. Some of the showers across England and Wales could certainly be heavy, and there's a risk of some hail and thunderstorms in the mixture there as well. But where you're in the sunny intervals in between, it will feel relatively pleasant. Highs around 15 degrees Celsius, quite up above par for the time of year. Throughout Saturday evening, that band in the north continues to push its way eastwards. We could see some stronger winds for a time across the Highlands and into Orkney with some coastal gales. But elsewhere, the showers will tend to ease their way off as we move into the night. So a slightly chillier night to come here underneath those clearer intervals. But it means that we start off Sunday with much more drier weather around. And actually Sunday looking like a pretty fine day for many of us. Some cloud just lingering across the far east coast of England, and the cloud will begin to build throughout Northern Ireland as well later on in the day. And it's these frontal systems that will then start pushing across the rest of the UK as we move into the start of the new working week. Low pressure then returns as we move into the new week, and it will turn unsettled once again with further spells of cloud and rain, but temperatures generally staying on the mild side. Bye-bye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, girls and boys. It's 7 o'clock and I'm Laurence Fox.
Now tonight, we are going to delve into the murky world of the patriarchy. Is it all a storm in a teacup? Or have women, and are women, being excluded from society based solely on their sex? I will be joined by a woman and a man to discuss this. Then I welcome you to the Fox and the Hounds panel. Oh, Cass, really? I am the Fox and I have two news hounds with me to digest some of the biggest news of the week. And finally, I'm being challenged in my view that being bisexual is being greedy. Then you get to put me on the spot, Fox on the spot, and ask me anything. And don't forget, most importantly, I want to hear from you. So send me your views at gbviews@gbnews.uk or at Lots of Fox on Twitter. That's all coming up after the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Laurence, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against the Russian president. It's accusing Vladimir Putin of war crimes against Ukraine, including the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. The Kremlin has described the claims as outrageous and says it doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Russia must be held accountable.
This is a historic moment in the conflict in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court, which operates independently, has issued an indictment for President Putin and the Children's Commissioner for appalling crimes against children. And whilst they operate independently, it's really important the international community support them and give them the tools to do the job, which is why I'll be hosting on Monday with my Dutch opposite number 40 countries from around the world to give them the support to conduct the investigations, to look after witnesses, to care for the victims so that they can see this through and we hope have accountability for those appalling crimes.
Security guards at Heathrow Airport are to strike for 10 days over Easter in a dispute over pay. Unite Union says over 1,400 of its members at Terminal 5 will walk out from the 31st of March after voting in favour of industrial action. The airport says it has contingency plans in place to deal with the strike, but is urging the union to discuss its proposed 10% pay rise. More than 175,000 appointments had to be postponed during this week's junior doctors' strike to protect emergency care. NHS boss Professor Sir Stephen Powers has called the three-day walkout unprecedented, saying it's had a greater impact than all other action we've seen so far this winter combined. Leaders of striking doctors have called for a meeting with the Health Secretary to resolve the pay dispute. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay rise. Police Constable Mary Ellen Betley-Smith will keep her job despite being found guilty for attacking a former Aston Villa football player with a taser and a baton. Former striker Dalian Atkinson died after being kicked at least twice in the head by another officer, Benjamin Monk, who's been jailed for 8 years for manslaughter. Ms Betley-Smith was cleared of assaulting Mr Atkinson after trial, but the Independent Office for Police Conduct found there was a gross misconduct disciplinary case to answer for her use of force. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have been celebrating St Patrick's Day with the Irish Guards. Kate and William have attended the St Patrick's Day parade in Aldershot. It's Kate's first time at the parade as the colonel of the regiment. The royal couple also met with past members of the Irish Guards. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Laurence Fox.
If by some happy chance you're fortunate enough to while away some evening hours with a woman of a certain age, and when I say certain age, I mean 35 and under, there is a possibility that at some point during your whisperings of sweet nothings, there will come forth from your amour, quite suddenly and out of the blue, a stern-eyed and serious utterance of the P word. What is the P word, I hear you asking? The P word is patriarchy. And if by some miracle you don't hop out of your seat there and then, flee the vegan restaurant for the hills, I suggest strapping in for the ride, as you are given the familiar lecture about all the wrongs of mankind, an agonising intersection of identity politics, grievance culture, and unending and systemic oppression. Some, and I emphasise only some, Young women, you see, are taught from an early age that everything which goes wrong in life is somehow someone else's fault. And when I say someone else's fault, I mean some man's fault. They have been well trained and versed from a young age, all through education camp, to keep a keen eye out for this cruel, crossing and invidious patriarchy created to deprive them from opportunity and fulfillment. Not being a sociologist myself, I will leave the scientific explanations to another of superior learning. But as far as I can gather, almost everything that irks some young women nowadays can always be found in time to be the fault of some young man. His patriarchal scheming and his unending desire to stamp glass ceiling after glass ceiling upon her troubled head. The better schooled raise some interesting facts about the deleterious effect on societal cohesion as a whole, caused by the historical exclusion of women in all areas of life. From town planning, crash test dummies to modern healthcare, all designed by men, for men. These are entirely valid points and would land strongly, I imagine, if they weren't separated out from the intersected, identitarian, woke soup of man-blaming, which constitutes modern feminism. Faced with this laser-like patriarchal glare, the average incel is left with few options, either to just carry on being himself and gently shrugging off the jibes of misogynist and toxic masculinity, or to ally himself more closely with a future mate by stepping ever nearer the precipice of becoming a male feminist. Or just go the whole hog, chop off his crown jewels, symbols of male oppression, lob on a mini dress, and give up on manhood altogether. Which is strange, especially given that this latest iteration of feminism, in many cases, seems to struggle more than the previous ones to define what a woman actually is. As was witnessed this week in Hollywood, in a television studio for all to see, the deeply regressive display of years long past. A woman sinking to her knees before a man in a desperate attempt to appease the ever-powerful patriarchy.
It's interesting because I look at someone like you and I can't imagine anybody disliking you.
Oh, please. Do you want to know, ironically, who dislikes me the most sometimes?
Who?
Myself.
Oh, me too. Oh. But I guess, you've asked me now, you've asked me, what I would do to combat the hate, right?
Yeah.
But what do you do?
Wow. One thing is for sure, the patriarchy is an upsy-downy, topsy-turvy thing. Which brings me tidily on to Comrade Hunt and his budget. New Chief Commissar to the Treasury for the People's Republic of Great Britain, installed by Chairman Sunak at a hastily called People's Assembly following Chairman Truss and Comrade Kwarteng's hasty replacement in the recent coup, Comrade Hunt, his face locked in raptured joy, revealed a budget of maximum well-being for the People's Republic of Great Britain this week, as he announced, following a 26-minute standing ovation, that mothers and fathers were no longer required to raise their own children. The state would provide free comrade sitting whilst mummy and daddy got back to the important business of getting back to work. The state media were enraptured by Comrade Hunt's great parental leap forward. However, not all were enamoured in the People's Assembly, as a tiny minority of comrades, harkening back to bygone days when parents raised their children instead of the party, were quickly removed to the camps by representatives from the Department for Education and Indoctrination. But on a slightly more serious note, it wouldn't have mattered who gave the budget last week. It certainly didn't feel like a Conservative one, or a Labour one, or a Lib Dem one, or an anything one. It didn't even sound like it was conceived by a politician at all. It was the sound of the establishment talking to itself, a juggernaut trying to convince the people they were getting something for nothing. Via some witchcraft or sleight of hand, parents were getting comrade care for free, despite the PR UK having the highest tax burden since the last Great War. Yet there's something very unnatural about this position, as motherhood, fatherhood and parenthood, more broadly, are denigrated and belittled like never before. The clock begins to tick for some women of a certain age, scowling at the patriarchal unfairness of it all, as birth rates plummet and the population cannot, or will not, replace itself. And yet, by every metric, children thrive with two present parents in their lives. But our collective narcissism in the defiance of patriarchal oppression leaves us subdued and unsure as to the benefits of our only purpose in existence, all the while the regime taxes us towards work rather than incentivising us towards building and raising a family. Organic societal progress is a wonderful thing, but forced progressivism is not. The idea that masculinity is in some way toxic and in need of being constantly called out makes the weakest, deviant and most toxic of men turn our backs on a unique identity only to exchange it for some estrogen injections, a boob job and a miniskirt, whilst the standard dads of yesteryear are mocked and derided by women who know much better. These dinosaurs, products of this patriarchy, these simple men with simple desires to love and provide for their children and their families, have been replaced with male feminists who will sidle, swoon and smooch their ways into a lady's undergarments whilst whispering the sweet nothings of equality, equity and inclusion. Are we to continue down this path of patriarchal obsession, or is it time to make mums and dads great again? Tonight, on this, the patriarchal special, we're going to find out. So, tonight, I am asking you, should we make parents great again? Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, well, first up tonight, I am very pleased to be able to introduce journalist and author Maya Dusenberry. Maya has done all the research, so you, I don't have to. And don't immediately turn your nose up and think it's her indoors moaning again. This is serious. It impacts your mothers, your wives, and your sisters' and daughters' lives. Good evening. Women are 50% more likely to be misdiagnosed following a heart attack, but only make up 25% of participants across 31 landmark trials for congestive heart failure between 1987 and 2012. So joining me all the way from Portland is journalist and author Maya Dusenberry. Good evening, Maya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. So we at least we've got as far as assuming that men and women are two totally separate creatures. I was looking through your notes today, and can you talk me through what particularly affects women ahead of men in society?
Well, my research has focused on how gender bias affects medicine generally. So I think that women have been under-researched in medical research, as you mentioned, when it comes to heart attacks. That's one great example, but across a range of conditions and treatments for a long time, we mostly studied men and extrapolated those results to women. And so one big problem is that often women symptoms are not recognized and they have more side effects from treatments. And so there's kind of this knowledge gap where we just know more about men's bodies and symptoms and conditions and less about women's.
And do you think there is something to be said? I was looking through the medical data that women are getting discharged from hospital for having panic attacks when they're having heart attacks, or being told that they've got the endometriosis is getting misdiagnosed as other things. Are men capable of reading what's going on in a woman's medical situation?
Well, I think you bring up another good point, is that I think it's partly that there's this lack of knowledge. So even the very best doctors maybe just aren't trained to recognize that a woman is having symptoms, say, of a heart attack, because we do know that women on average have a sort of different symptom profile. They're more likely to have jaw pain and nausea rather than the kind of classic Hollywood heart attack. But I think another big problem is that there's this stereotype that women are hysterical and kind of overly emotional. And so I think it's very common for women to have their symptoms dismissed as anxiety, panic attack, depression, or kind of stress. You know, that's a big thing I heard in my research, is that there's this tendency to kind of say it's all in your head. And I think that impacts all patients, but especially women, because of these stereotypes that we have around gender.
Yes, you call it an insidious and entrenched bias, laying out its sometimes catastrophic consequences. Do you think that there is an insidious and entrenched bias towards men as well, certainly in regards to suicide rates and, death in war? Or do you think that this is something more nuanced that we can pick up as a society ahead of that?
Well, I think that it's certainly true that it's the case that men and women have different risks on average for different conditions. So, as you know, women are more likely to have depression or anxiety, but men are more likely to commit suicide.
How does that work?
When it comes
so if you say men are more likely to have, women are more likely to have anxiety and depression, but men are more likely to commit suicide, surely that would be a false positive, that you would expect if men are more likely to commit suicide, that men are more likely to be depressed and suicidal.
Well, I think that the explanation for that, my understanding is that, men might be less likely to get the help they need because of our, gender stereotypes that discourage men from asking for help, from talking about their feelings. So they may be, underdiagnosed if they're struggling, and so more likely to get to that point of committing suicide.
So to follow on from that point where you're saying that sometimes, so if a man is less likely to discuss his personal issues and, would rather not say anything and end up taking his own life, tragically, that a woman is possibly more likely to explore the inner workings of her mental health and personal situation. Would that be one of the findings of your reports and writings?
Yeah, I think that's my read of that particular disparity when it comes to suicide. And I think we also, see with other conditions, men are less likely to have certain autoimmune diseases, women are more likely, but that means that potentially men might be underdiagnosed, because we just know that for both genders, if a condition is sort of stereotyped as this is a male condition or a female condition, the other gender tends to get kind of overlooked. So I think that that's a case where it certainly can go both ways. But I think the bigger problem is just that a lot of conditions that mostly affect women have been really under-researched entirely. And so that's one reason that there's this knowledge gap that I think impacts women disproportionately compared to men.
And in terms of language, how would you feel about, traditionally language was like women were referred to as the fairer sex or the weaker sex. How would that resonate now in 2023? I personally wouldn't resonate with me. That would seem like pretty outdated language to me. I don't think there's any evidence that women are, the weaker sex. Fairer? They might be fairer, though. Certainly fairer than men, as far as I know.
I mean, you said it, not me, but...
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And that was lovely to speak to you. Coming up next is, thank you very much, Maya Dusenberry. Coming up next is a new feature with a new NAF name, thanks to Cass, who is now doing this thing with the auto cue, so I can't read it. Is a new feature with a new NAF name. I'm talking to Dominic Samuels, Paul Connew on My Fox and Hounds panel. Back in 3? Really?
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, following Wednesday's budget, things are tough, but as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. In my take at 10, the charity Oxfam has banned the word mother. My reaction. My Mark Meets guest is military hero and former Black Rod of Parliament David Leakey, who called out ex-Speaker John Bercow's bullying. Plus, one of the founding fathers of Brexit. How does he think it's going? Douglas Carswell. Well-connected journalist Petronella Wyatt and Channel 4 star Kim Woodburn. See you at 8.
Oi, oi! Now, it can't have escaped you that Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, this week delivered a budget. The biggest talking point is childcare. Now, this fits neatly in with my previous discussion, as many parents have to make the decision as to who stays at home and who goes to work. The cost of living, compared to 40 years ago, means it's often unsustainable to live on one income alone. So the first topic, my panel of news hounds, is the childcare budget promise. And is it a vote winner or a promise they won't ever have to deliver on? Dominique, what do you think?
It's a funny one, actually, because when I initially heard about this policy, I thought it was a positive thing, because what we usually hear, is that childcare costs in this country are so expensive compared to that of other European countries. But then I listened to Miriam Kate MP, and she made quite a convincing argument about mothers who actually want to stay home. They should have the opportunity to be supported as well, because I think what we actually encourage is a society where complete strangers are actually raising our children. And whilst that's going on, our institutions are sort of indoctrinating our children with all of these wacky ideas, and the place for parents is becoming increasingly obsolete. So, whilst I think in terms of an immediate solution to a problem, and the premise of it is to encourage more people to get back into work, to grow the economy, okay. But in terms of the morality of it, I would like to live in a country where mothers that want to stay at home are able to do so.
Well, I'm the father of four grown-up daughters who would actually appreciate this. This is an interesting policy. I think it's a good policy in theory. In practice, will it work? And if nothing else, I think Labour, if and as likely they win the next election, they're going to be picking up much of the cost of this, because it's going to take some time to roll out effectively.
But isn't that half the point? The fact that, so I was thinking about this today. I was having a chat with a friend, and we were like, well, if we take time off work, we go back to work, and we have someone look after our own kids so that we can go and do our other things. What about the person who is going to have to do the other things with us? So, you know, where does it stop? Who stops getting the childcare? Does everyone get the childcare? You know, because if you go into Sainsbury's and the lady who's working in Sainsbury's has also got childcare, because everyone's getting the childcare, who's looking after her kids?
Well, but we have to get more women back into the workplace. And
why?
Because, well, for a number of reasons, not least the fact that many women want to go to work but can't go to work because the cost of childcare often makes it impossible for them to do it. You know, as Dominic was saying, we have the highest childcare costs of any major European economy, and that is shameful on our part.
Dominique, should we cut the cost of childcare, or should we send parents back to work? Do you think we should incentivise parents towards family?
Yes, we should incentivise parents towards family.
How would you do that? Give us a policy.
Well, okay. Well, in terms of a policy, maybe something like, so Viktor Orban did something like that in Hungary, where you get family tax credits. Something like that to actually give families a financial incentive to reproduce, because we know that birth rates are plummeting all across the Western world. And that's because we've built our wealth, really, I think quite artificially, this sort of neoliberal economic agenda where everything's about the free market, everything's about GDP, without actually focusing on family and culture. Those things have been degraded, and what we're finding is, as our culture's being degraded and as family is mattering less and less, our economy just gets worse anyway. So what has it actually achieved?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that citing the Putin simpatico Orban regime in Hungary actually is a...
I've not heard Viktor Orban say much about Putin. Have you really? You know, he just does his own vibe.
Well, can you not identify a policy that you think is helpful?
With your 4 daughters?
No, I have one daughter who is... No, but I have one who actually prioritises, in her mind, being a stay-at-home mother. She has 5 young children, and that's what she wants to do, and she has every right to do that.
Should we venerate them? Should we venerate women who put aside the sort of, you know, material whims of
yes, we should venerate them, not just on Mother's Day this weekend.
Well, we had International Women's Day. That's 2 days.
65 days
That's
a
2
year.
days. The LGBT lot get 3 months.
Whether they're stay-at-home.
Honestly.
But whether they're stay-at-home mothers or whether they're
all right, we'll have
working
stay-at-home
mothers,
Mother's Day. We've got Gay Uncle Day.
But there's definitely a culture nowadays where people actually do look down upon women that do just want to stay at home, or perhaps see their job as being a homemaker and a mother.
Is that a cultural problem? So
yeah.
Should we? You'd have to sort of reorder culture artificially in a way to go. Something that we had in the past, where we looked to women who raised children with such respect. You know, when you used to walk down the street and there was, you know, you're like, well, OK, behave really well. We'd have to reorder culture. How would you do it?
Well, we ordered culture to demonise women and convince them that if they did stay at home and looked after the children, they were internalised misogynists. So I suppose you'd have to sort of reprogram people to actually see the benefits of that. I mean, looking at it quite cynically, I think this whole men and women both entering the tax system was really just a way for governments to extract more money from people.
Double the tax burden.
Rather than promoting this idea of freedom.
You seem sceptical about the idea that women want to work, want to chase their careers.
Yeah, I do. No, I am obviously a woman, so
She also works.
I'm also
1
working.
+ 1 equals 3.
So of course I respect that, and of course I respect that a lot of women want to work. But I do think we've sort of encouraged this culture where women are shamed and often feel guilty about wanting to stay at home. I mean, personally, you know, hopefully one day when I'm married, before I was quite sceptical of this, but I think I've decided that I would like to stay at home and look after my baby. So hopefully I can afford to do that.
For a long time, there was a reverse, if you like, a reversed viewpoint where, in fact, women who went to work were almost looked at, oh, they're not looking after their children. So they were in a sense
maybe we need
and that's
to go.
not so many years ago. The Second World War began to change that, but it took a long time afterwards for it to really change.
Well, maybe we need to go back to that. I have to say, in the interests of Ofcom impartiality, I'm Team Dominique on this one. Right, I'm tooting the half-time horn. Dominique Samuels, Paul Cornu, stay there. We are back in 3.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Bonsoir, bonsoir. Earlier on, I asked you, should we make parents great again? And you've also been getting in touch about our panel discussion, so here are some of your reactions so far. Jackie says, the rot set in the 90s, when the workplace, both commercial and public, decided to have a no-blame culture, which means nobody takes responsibility for what they do or don't do. That's very interesting. No blame also means no responsibility. Nettie says, thank you, dear Laurence, for airing this. You are one brave guy. Yippee! All power to your elbow, says Kate. And keep it up, please. Jill, I'm winning tonight. Usually everyone just shouts at me and tells me I'm a beep. Jill says, completely with you, Loza. Farming out young children to strangers 30 hours a week can cause extreme detachment issues. Such trauma from being separated from a main caregiver could manifest in later life. I'm winning. I won tonight. No one was angry with me. That's brilliant. Well, that's enough for you. Thank you. Back at home. Now we go back to the studio. Well, I'm going to relax and be sort of say how wonderful I am. And Dominique's going to tell me about Oxfam. What did they do?
Oxfam. So, I didn't know we were actually talking about this first.
Sorry.
But, okay. But they released 92-page guidance that included completely insane things, like we're not allowed to say mother or father. We instead have to say parent. And also, didn't it say something about English being a coloniser language?
Dreadful coloniser. Pretty rich after the Haiti experience, but apparently at least they got their pronouns right when they were doing what they did in Haiti.
It's just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, can anyone really take this seriously? I think there's something a bit more pernicious about it, though, because what is this agenda that's reaching far and wide, that seeks to basically remove women specifically from our language for the benefit of who? Who is really going to be offended?
What are your... First of all, what pronouns would you prefer me to use? And secondly, who's benefiting from this weird Oxfam?
Well, Oxfam do some great work, although they have had some shameful scandals, the Haiti abuse of, of women and children being a case in point. But this was just absolutely absurd. I thought... when I first read this morning, and I thought actually that it was satirical at first glance. But I mean, it is ridiculous. And I suspect
it's the left that's doing it.
I suspect that a lot of Oxfam are going to get a lot of complaints from Oxfam donors who are going to say, "Come off it."
Yeah, because it's not inclusive.
And I think most Oxfam staff and Oxfam volunteers. I'm going to ignore this anyway. They're going to use mum, dad, he, she, whatever.
What's it saying? Fortunately, I don't have to squint. OK, so we're swapping mother or father for parent or... Can you make it bigger, guys? I'm not it's like reading a microscope. I can't even... Dominique, someone read that to me.
I'm as blind as a bat.
Thank you. They put it up on the screen so I can read it and commentate on it, but I can't commentate on it because it's like looking at a microscope.
I think the issue is, though, is this whole idea that it's somehow inclusive, when, on the whole, most people take no issue with the terms mother or father. So who are you trying to include?
Four people, I reckon, in an organisation.
You are actually being exclusive because you're actually excluding the vast majority of people who take no issue with this. And I think there is this culture that seeks to detach us from one another. It seeks to detach children from their parents, and it seeks to detach the meaning of words from their actual reality. If you are a mother, you likely have a vagina. OK,
not likely. It's almost guaranteed.
It's guaranteed.
I mean, in fact, it is guaranteed. A vagina was involved some way or another.
Exactly. So to sort of suggest that, transgender parents might be offended by this, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, because if they're offended, I would say, kindly, that's your issue, but biology says otherwise.
So this is quite interesting. I've got to ask a question. Can I ask a question? Yeah. Dominique's talking about inclusive language. She's also talking about the fact that something we would probably all agree on, which is that this is maybe not the overwhelming proportion of people who are running this. Who is infiltrating these little organisations with their funny little woke madnesses?
I think on the woke issue, I think the vast majority of the public find the woke thing very, very confusing, and they aren't as preoccupied by it as some of us as we are in the media. Well, exactly. And I just think that
the NHS are preoccupied by it.
I feel every sympathy for those who are transgender or have issues, but they are a small minority. We should be sympathetic to them, and support them, but this is taking it to absurd degrees. But it's become almost a fashion or an obsession.
Obsession is the right word.
Should we get politics out of? Should we get politics out of every single national institution? Completely 100%. No political organisational moves whatsoever. So get all the Stonewall, everything out of all these institutions, because that's where it's come in. Someone's actually bothered to write an email from Stonewall going, by the way, Oxfam, we need to. Sort your stuff out, mate.
Yeah, we need to have gender-neutral parenting.
But Oxfam, for all its faults, does some great work. But this just makes them look ridiculous. I mean, this is like something that you would expect from from a satirical comedy show, The Thick of It, or whatever. I mean, it really is.
But this is reality. We literally live in a clown world now.
Although, would we be reacting as much if it wasn't around Mother's Day. I think
Yes,
in a
we
way
would.
it was God's gift to every headline writer, this one.
Birthing person's been around in the NHS for ages. This whole idea of indoctrinating our kids and like this, what I'm finding really hard is being told that black is white and up is down. I find it really, really stressful. So people come up to you and they go, the one that really, really bothers me is the, there is no 15-minute cities. It's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they've literally installed the cameras and told you that you can't travel here. And it's like, we're just using inclusive language, but we're also totally destroying the meaning of mothers.
Yeah.
What do we do to fight back?
Like, I view...
Or what does an impartial person do to fight back?
An impartial...
Like a very impartial person.
Well, look, I view this attack on language as, I think, a brainwashing exercise, and people are so brainwashed that they don't even know it's happening. The only thing that you can do is to not submit to what they want you to submit to. So, you know, personally, I don't want to call Sam Smith, for example, a they or a them, because...
Themchester?
Or a fish of them.
Yeah, I live there. No.
Because when you actually succumb to that, you endorse a version of reality that's quite frankly non-existent. And I think the issue with woke is it seeks to sort of promote this false consciousness, this false idea that, you know, we have all of this compassion, we have all of this empathy, when really all that woke is obsessed with is like wrapping themselves in circles, and then so they don't even know what reality is anymore. I think it's a symptom of real confusion.
But woke and its twin, cancel culture, are something which the vast majority of the public at the Dog and Duck or in the supermarket or whatever don't care
Fox and
about.
Hounds?
They don't care about. You know,
Dog and Fox?
We are in the media obsessed about it, but the public aren't. The public aren't. And they're going to call a man he and a woman she, and in fact, you know...
Well, actually, the public would call... If a bloke turned up in a wig and said, I want to be called her, most of the public would go, yeah, fine,
but
whatever.
But what sections of the public are we talking about? Are we
The
talking
average
about,
one, the average public.
Are we talking about the adults?
Oh, hang on, she's shouting at me in my ears. We've got to go.
I was going to make a good point.
Make it quickly. Go.
Most of these people don't really engage with the news, and they likely don't even know what's going on, which is why they don't care. But when it comes to our actual children that are absorbing all of this through pop culture, through cartoons where you've got non-binary bulls, they do believe this crap, and that is what's dangerous.
But it doesn't change their lives. I think they are not. They're tolerant, remarkably tolerant, but they're not obsessed. And we sometimes are obsessed about it.
That's a very good point, actually, and you're exactly right. It's the difference between a session. Right, coming up, I have more of my views and opinions challenge. Oh, challenge? No, that's not fun. This time about bisexuality, and that is with activist Lewis Oakley. I will be back in 3.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Doobs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Willkommen back. Now, last Wednesday, I spoke to apprentice and Celebsco dating star Navid Soul about being bisexual, as he dated both men and women on the Channel 4 programme. It was an interesting conversation, and I wanted to find out what made him realise he was attracted to both men and women. So here's what I asked at the time. Now, Navid,
Yes.
Are you familiar with the American podcaster Steven Crowder?
I have no clue, to be honest, Laurence.
So he has this thing called Change My Mind.
Okay.
Right. And you have said that you're bisexual.
Yes.
I am saying there is no such thing as bisexual. Bisexual, change my mind.
Bisexual, change your mind? I mean...
Bisexuality bisexuality doesn't exist. Change my mind.
Oh, but you know what? Well, you know what? It's good to have a bit of 50-50 in it, have a bit of...
Is it, or is it greedy?
You know what? You have to experiment in life, Laurence. I mean, we just live once.
Don't worry, Baba.
We live once, and it's like, you know, why not just try, you know...
Give it all.
Yeah, give it all, exactly.
Give it all a go.
Exactly.
Oh, man, when they say educate yourself, having watched that back, I do need educating. So this prompted Lewis Oakley, one of the leading bisexual campaigners in the UK, to get in touch. Lewis is co-host of the Bisexual Brunch, a unique podcast for people who identify as bi, to come together and celebrate their sexuality, as he believes bisexual people aren't treated equally. So to talk more about this now, he's joining me on the show this evening. Lewis.
Hello.
Bisexual, no such thing, change my mind.
I'm here. Pinch me. I'm real, honestly.
Yeah, come on.
I mean, I guess, well, if you don't think that bisexuality is real, what do you think I am? So
I think everyone's a bit everything. It's just like, if you're trying to keep it both in the game, then, you know...
I do believe that there are gay and straight people in the world.
Definitely there are gay and straight people, but a lot of people there, you know, we're all on a bit of a spectrum. We're always told this. Like, you know, it's all it's a spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are not a lot of out people that identify as bi. I think more people would probably identify as straight, but know that they're not 100% straight. Like, we see that a lot.
Are you more one or the other?
I'm probably, and I hate the term, 50-50. It doesn't really...
That must be a lonely place to be.
No, it's not. I've been in a relationship for 7 years now.
Yeah, I know, but I'm looking at... what was I reading through? It said, what I found out over the years is many people are on board with equality just as long as it doesn't affect them personally. They'll happily clap a gay couple because it doesn't affect them, but suggest dating a queer person, then all of a sudden the prejudice they pretend isn't there bubbles to the surface. So what happens when you're with your missus...
Yep.
...and you're in a gay club? Talk me through it.
A lot of different things. So we've definitely been in a gay club and been kissing, and people have been like, don't do that in here. Like, why are you doing that in a gay bar? I think I had a really rude awakening when I stopped dating a man. So I dated a man for 2.5 years. I became single again. And I'd said that whole time to all of my friends, you know, I'm bi, I'm just dating him. And then when I started dating women again, there were some gay friends that did not like it. You know, I remember found a lovely young woman outside of a club that we'd been dancing. We had a little kiss outside. And the next day on the group chat with some friends, it was like, oh my God. And a picture of us kissing, it was like, a gay guy being seduced in Soho, disgusting. So there is that kind of prejudice there. And my other half has been told everything, like, oh, he's going to cheat on you, you're going to catch HIV. Or the weirdest one was, well, there's so few men in the world that are attracted to men. Like, you could have any straight guy. Why have you got to take a bisexual? There's a load of weird stuff that tumbles out of people's mouths.
I think you might be, but I mean, if bisexual is real, which I now understand it is, because
Yay!
I've educated myself, the B of LGBTQ++ seems to be a lonely place to be, though. Do you know what I mean? So, on the one hand, if you're happy and you've found a great girl and you're happy with her, your gay friends are going to be annoyed, and if you find a nice guy, your straight friends are going to go, come on, man, you know you're straight.
Well, I think you get yourself into trouble, I get myself into trouble.
Do it. But then I don't get into trouble. Tell us everything. We want to know the scene.
Look, I think that within the LGBT, and I understand why we're all coming together and why, you know, it's a happy community, we stand together strong, but actually I think that...
Is there such a thing, though, as the LGBTQ+ community?
Yeah, it's real, it's there.
Yeah, but from what I can gather, they don't like bisexuals in there.
Some of them
They're
don't.
very begrudging to the bisexuals.
Some. I think there's two main issues, right? So the statistics show that the LGBT community is the most common place that bisexuals will experience biphobia. And the other one, the one that I'm always banging the drum about, is the funding. So bisexuals make up roughly just about half of all LGBT people, but we receive about 1% of funding. So there are a lot of issues that are bisexual specific that are never addressed.
So it's something quite interesting about this sort of, you know, without wishing to sort of sound stupid, there's a sort of unresolved nature to bisexuality. To me, it sounds like unresolved. It means like you'll go to your deathbed maybe with a guy and maybe with a girl. You don't know yet. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the L community, you're pretty much going to go to bed with a lesbian. In the G community, you're going to go to bed with a gay. You know, this is how you're going to spend your life. So how do you maintain a sense of identity within that sort of fluxing situation?
It's hard. A lot of bi people struggle. So I run an advice column, which I set up basically because my inbox, after I do things like this, is always full of bisexual people with questions. And one of them is always, you know, how do I, like, come across as bisexual? How do I, how can I be bisexual if I'm in a straight relationship? Because if I hold hands with my opposite sex partner and we walk down the street, the world sees us as straight. And then if I'm always constantly saying to people, I'm bi, people are like, oh my God,
what does your opposite sex partner feel about you saying I'm bi?
I mean, she's fine with it.
You have to be pretty open-minded?
Well, she knew about it before I met her, but a lot of people are. A lot of women, you know, I think that's another problem. No one wants to hear that, you know, we need to have a conversation with some straight women. The statistics show, I think it's 63%
of straight women wouldn't have sex with a bi guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Or kiss a bi guy.
No, that's 63% wouldn't have sex with a guy, wouldn't have sex with a bi guy, and then it's 19% wouldn't have sex with someone that's had sex, a guy that's had sex with a man. It's so that there is that to kind of deal with, and you don't want to ever be that person that's saying, "Well, you must find bi men attractive."
Do you have the same reverse stigma? Like, if someone's just been solely gay, do you find them less attractive than someone who's been like had a few?
Gays and straights, they're hot.
Are they?
They're all good.
All right. Okay. So to all the people out there, to all the bisexuals out there in the audience tonight, what's your best piece of advice to how to live their best life?
My best piece of advice, listen to the podcast Bisexual Brunch. It's really good, and we come up with loads of tips.
Where can we find Bisexual Brunch?
Everywhere you get your podcasts.
I love it. I'm tuning in.
Yeah, there you go. There's my advice.
All right. So it's get onto the Bisexual Brunch. And in order to make yourself feel good is to live your best life.
Live your life. It's hard. I think a lot of bisexual people don't know any other bisexuals. That's something where we're distinctly different from, you know, gay and lesbian
Maybe
people.
there are a lot more bisexuals than you think.
Well, I know, but they're not out. So we're sort of always at the mercy of gay and straight people's
She's doing it. I
all right, sorry, Cass.
about the bisexuality. Thank you for joining me at home, in the studio and in your hearts. Coming up next is the lengthy Mark Dolan. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Hello there. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Many of us will have to hold out until Sunday for the best of the weather throughout this weekend, because through Friday evening and into Saturday it's low pressure that is very much in charge, bringing fronts across much of the UK and a generally unsettled setup. So as we move throughout Friday evening, there will be showers and longer spells of rain across pretty much all areas of the country. A few clearer spells here and there, and where that comes with lighter winds, we could see the odd mist and fog patch forming, perhaps some sea fog forming around some coasts as well. But underneath that cloud, temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius. Just that bit chillier up in the far north, Shetland down to around 3 degrees Celsius. Throughout Saturday, then a continued risk of showers throughout the day. More persistent though across areas of Scotland and Northern Ireland, turning quite damp for here at a time. Some of the showers across England and Wales could certainly be heavy, and there's a risk of some hail and thunderstorms in the mixture there.